manufacturers. Now, before we get any further, I'd like for us to please rise for the national and East African anthem. I'd like to call upon Ruth Lamlem to present us to the Lord in a word of prayer. Let's give her a round of applause as she joins us on stage. Thank you.
Let us bow our heads for a word of prayer. Okay, been told to hold on.
All right. Let's please rise as we welcome our chief guest, Honorable Lee Kenyanjui, the Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Trade and Industry. A round of applause. Thank you. Let's take our seats. Buenos dias, we were waiting for you so that we can all be presented to prayer by our very own Ruth Lamlem. So I think it's only fair that she takes the stage.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. Father, we come before you this morning. We thank you for your love and care. Thank you for bringing us this day. Thank you for what is ahead of us. We place it to your able hands. Lord, we pray that every discussion, every conversation that you're going to have here is for the betterment of our country as we forge forward as an industry. We thank you and we bless your name. For in Jesus' name we do pray and believe.
A round of applause for Ruth, kindly. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Mwangi from Serena Hotel. Mr. Mwangi, if you could please join us. Oh, here he is. Mr. Mwangi is just going to give us very briefly the safety brief.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mwangi Juguna, Security Manager of Serena Hotel. On behalf of the management of Serena, I would like to welcome all of you, and I believe you'll have a very good session. Within Serena, for emergency purposes, we have more of an ambulance siren sounder. If you happen to hear it when inside here, you are advised to walk through the 2 doors, exit doors provided behind you, and move out of the hotel and across the road. That is our main assembly point. If you happen to be on the side of the pool side and the lower side of the hotel, you move to the garden. There is a gate, the southern gate, which will be guided by our security personnel to the same assembly point. If the danger is coming from the front, use the doors, the rear doors behind us. You'll be guided by our banqueting team and security team how to exit through Nyerere Road, again to the same assembly point. We don't intend to do any drill today, so if you happen to hear, please walk out of the room. in regard to safety, security inside this room. Anything which can fit into your pocket as you step out with it. That is your mobile phone, anything smaller. Or big item, your computers, your bags, please leave them inside this room. We have our banqueting team and security team to make sure that everything in this room is secure. In regard to help, in the event you have a medical issue, we have a first aid clinic manned by a hotel nurse. Please contact the reception and you'll be guided on where to be assisted. Anything beyond the nurse, we have a 24-hour doctor on call. He'll be called and within few minutes, we'll assist you accordingly. If you happen to be a resident in Serena, we do encourage you to make use of the safety box provided in your rooms to store your valuables. Other domestic, when you walk out of the two doors provided behind you, right at the center here, we have the washroom area. Karibuni sana and have a good meeting. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Mwangi. We appreciate you. All right, so once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, a very good morning, and welcome to the 2025 Manufacturing Sector Outlook and the launch of the 2025 Manufacturing Priority Agenda by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Let's give them a round of applause for bringing us together. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Nina Shaban. I'm a business news anchor and reporter at the Nation Media Group, and I shall be your MC and moderator through the event. I'm very humbled in that. Now, the program is extremely tight, and now that we are actually behind in time, it's going to be even tighter, especially when it comes to our speeches. We'll make them short but hard-hitting. Now, you've also had some changes in the program, so allow me to just take you through real quick. We'll have the welcoming remarks from Mr. Tobias Alando, the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and then following suit will be the outlook of the manufacturing sector, which is going to be done by Miriam Bomet, remarks from the chair, Jen Kuruku, remarks by the principal secretaries, keynote address by our chief guest, Honorable CS, official launch of the Manufacturing Priority Agenda. We'll have panel discussions. We have a very, very heavy panel and well-versed, of course, which will also include a Q&A session. And then closing remarks by Mr. Lawrence Njenga and a media presser. Now, without any further ado, let's welcome Mr. Tobias Alando, the Chief Executive of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, for his welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to apologize for keeping you and starting slightly late. Recognizing the protocol, our CS, Honorable Kinenjui, and our PS, our chair, the board members present, and the industrial leaders present today. First, I want to assure you that you're not going to be arrested in this meeting. We're going to have a very good conversation. Today we are launching the Manufacturing Priority Agenda, and this is a conversation that we've been having for so many years. And under the Manufacturing Priority Agenda is anchored in four key pillars. We are focusing on global competitiveness, we are focusing on export-led industrialization, we are focusing on SME development, and agriculture for industry. But my point home to both private sector and to government is that we have to be intentional. 45 years ago, China was intentional. A couple of years ago, Singapore was intentional. And even if we go closer to African countries, Egypt has become intentional. And they've been intentional to grow their manufacturing sector. So whatever they have done, we can also do. And therefore, we have to be intentional to do just four things. We have to be intentional to ensure that our tax and policy environment is stable to grow our manufacturing sector. We have to be intentional to ensure that we reduce our industrial input costs. For us to be like Singapore, for us to be like Egypt, for us to be like China, we have to be intentional to strengthen our SMEs, the future of the industries. Lastly, we have to be intentional to grow our export competitiveness. There is no country in the world that has grown its economy only through trade. Majority of the countries in the world have grown through the manufacturing sector. Ladies and gentlemen, this program today, or this session today, we emphasize on being intentional. And I believe as the other speakers also come in, Buona CS, we are going to be intentional on those 4 things. Thank you very much.
Let's appreciate the CEO once more. Thank you very much. I'd like to now call upon Miss Miriam Bomet. Miriam is the head of policy and regulatory advocacy from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And what Miriam is going to do is present the outlook of the manufacturing sector and highlights of Manufacturing Priority Agenda 2025, which is the reason why we are here. Let's appreciate Ms. Miriam. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable CS Lee Kinyanjui, the PS industry, the CEO of Ken Invest, distinguished guests who are here, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Miriam Bomet. I head our policy and regulatory advocacy at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and it's a pleasure to be here today with all of you just to present a highlight of the Manufacturing Priority Agenda before we are able to launch it today. So as we start, we can move to the next slide, sorry for that. So as we start out, we just wanted to highlight a background about the manufacturing sector in terms of CAM and what we do. Sorry, my slides are running slower than my pace, but we can move to the next slides so that we can just highlight about CAM. We know Waziri is new to the ministry, but he's not new to CAM. He's been our great partner in Nakuru County, but you can see the work that we've done. Kenya Association is one of the first business membership associations established in 1959, even before our independence as a country, but it just shows how industry was well organized back then. The other issue is about the manufacturing sectors, which we usually highlight, which is in the next slide. So the manufacturing sector has been growing. You can see the number of sectors that we have here. We now have about 13 fully composed sectors and subsectors within them. But this is quite important because it shows that as Kenya, we're actually diversifying our manufacturing sectors as compared to some of our comparator countries and also some of our neighboring countries who you'll actually see are missing some particular manufacturing sector. So this is a good job, a well done job by Kenya as a whole in terms of diversifying its sectors. The other issue we wanted to share is the next slide, just to share the average share of manufacturing sector in the counties. You can see where the investment is. Mostly Nairobi, you can see Mombasa, we have Kiambu, we have Machakos, and you can see the slow decline in terms of manufacturing. But what this presents is an opportunity for the country to actually support county governments to focus on manufacturing. And I think one of the highlights of the issues that we've seen government taking up and through the ministry is the county aggregation industrial parks that are supposed to support a number of counties to look at the agriculture value chain and the integration that is required. But this is quite interesting data for us to see how we can support the other counties to move forward. I won't talk about the priority areas. I think the CEO has already spoken about it. In terms of what we are looking at, the last 2 years, we've been looking at global competitiveness in the manufacturing sector, tracking the statistics and numbers, and trying to see how local manufacturing is performing against the global manufacturing sector, looking at exports and how exports, we are supporting the competitiveness of our exports in the different markets that we have. We've also been looking at SME development. As you know, majority of the businesses in Kenya are small and medium-term enterprises, and what we call agriculture for industry, which is the putting out the offtake market by manufacturers so that we can support the forward and backward integration in the agriculture sector. So we've been implementing this for 2 years, and we'll be able to just share some highlights of what we are seeing in terms of competitiveness, but the details will be in the manufacturing priority agenda that we are launching today. But from 2024, and we usually come up with these priority agendas each year. So last year in 2024, if you look at the next slides, we've had a lot of achievements, and these are achievements both from industry support and also government. So I won't go into this, but of course the latest one that we saw under the Tax Law Amendment Act was the relief of that was given under the SHIF, the Social House Insurance Fund. It was one of the priority areas industries were requesting government to consider, and also on the affordable housing, issues to do with refunds. We are now allowed to get 100% refunds with regards to the mixed supplies. It's one of the wins that we were able to get through the National Treasury and the Kenya Revenue Authority. You can look at also other issues, governance issues that businesses have been bringing out and voicing out about public participation. We now have a clear policy. The legislative framework is already in place. Another issue is about the presidential directive around electricity and energy. So these are some of the wins that were able to be achieved, and this is just a summary of it. There are a lot more wins that we were able to achieve. So with regards to the manufacturing output, so we are quite clear that we are still a top destination for investment in Africa. So if you look at the next slide, we picked some of the data and statistics just to show our industrial competitiveness and looking at the global economy. So if you can see there, the world average competitive industrial performance is at 0.06%. You can see where Kenya is. We are at 0.01. Of course, you can analyze the statistics and say that we are still low, but if you look at it, we are ahead of a number of countries who are comparator countries. But of course, this doesn't mean that we should be comfortable. It means that we should continue growing, but you can see the trajectory that we have, looking at some of these universal, ranking that Kenya has been ranked. The other slide is about our manufacturing output and the data that we've been able to put out there. So what we've highlighted is that the value of manufacturing output increased in 2023. Of course, we are waiting for data for 2024 so that we can see that, but you can see as much as GDP is, the GDP contribution is going down, the value of manufacturing output is still increasing, and it increased by 13.1, which is double digits, and it's a good thing for the country. And you can see the resultant contribution in terms of 3.583 billion in 2023 as compared to 2022. The other issue is about compensation of employees in the sector. The growth was by 9.6%, and you can see the contribution and the value of that. And this just strengthens our position that the manufacturing sector continues to be one of the sectors that will ensure that employment is quite meaningful, there is value out of it. So we are looking at a number of data that would be able to tell us why Kenya still remains a top destination for investment. The other issue is about contribution to taxes. Again, we looked at the numbers that are published by the Kenya Revenue Authority and the other government agencies. You can see there between January 2023 and 2024, almost 13 months, manufacturers were able to contribute about 230 billion shillings in terms of custom taxes, and which is a monthly average of 17.7 billion. So you can see the contribution of the manufacturing sector. When you look at the domestic tax contribution, in the next slide, again, it's quite clear that the manufacturing sector is contributing a lot of taxes to the country, averaging about 10.4 billion from just this period of January 2023 and January 2024. So one of the things that we've been able to see is the correlation between manufacturing growth and the tax revenue contribution. And this is what is one of the underlying issues that we're putting out to government, that when you continue to support manufacturing growth, you continue to see increase in taxation. So we've told National Treasury and all the other government agencies that the formula is quite clear. If we are targeting to increase our revenue, let's support the manufacturing sector growth so that we can be able to see it. So it's a very simple formula, and the data supports it, as you can see. For us to get to 20% of manufacturing GDP, and this is what is under the Vision 2030 that has been set by this particular government, Kenya Kwanza, we are sure that if we are to get to the 20% by 2030, which is quite ambitious, we will be able to collect 1 trillion taxes, and we'll be able to see GDP grow to the 20%. So we just need to work backwards and come up with these strategies, which a lot of these strategies we've included in our manufacturing priority agenda. The other issue is about our export markets and how we've been able to take advantage. This is just an example of textile and apparel under AGOA. And you can see what we've been able to achieve as Kenya. So in 2023, we were able to export garments worth 50.8 billion to the US market. So you can actually see that Kenya is able to explore the opportunities in terms of the market opportunities and get the revenue that you need. And now that through the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization, we've been able to also open up more markets, whether it's the EU Kenya Economic Partnership Agreement, the AFCFTA that we have. So we know that there's a lot of opportunities that we have. The other factors are, of course, the clean energy landscape, that we are top leaders as a country, and also the digital economy, where we are able to see the strength in terms of Kenya's investments. In terms of global competitiveness as one of the strategies, and that will be the strategy that we'll highlight. The rest you'll be able to see a number of the issues in the publication that we launched today. But we wanted to just set the pace that one of the things we observed is that in the manufacturing sector in 2021 grew by 11.3%, the double digits that everybody talks about. So we are actually able to get to these digits. But in terms of just trying to see why were we able to grow, it's on the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know what happened during that period and the support that government was able to give. The tax incentives that we saw were given to the industry, and we were able to see that correlation between reduction of taxes and the growth of the manufacturing sector contribution. And then you can see now the decline, or the decline that was observed between 2022 and 2024. There's actually been a decline to our GDP contribution. So this is one of the things we wanted to highlight today, to just show also some of these issues that industry continues to say, that the taxation burden has gone up. We already have now statistics to show that any kind of tax incentives and support to industry will actually show us growth, can lead us to have growth in the manufacturing sector in terms of its GDP contribution. And of course, there were a number of sectors. So with regard to the top 5 manufacturing competitiveness concerns that we've been able to collect across the different industries, number 1 is the cost of production in Kenya, contributed by the high taxation on raw materials and industrial inputs. The other issue is about the stiff competition from competitors, and also the cheap imports that are still coming into the country. We are still at a trade deficit. We have more imports into the country than what we produce. Issues to do with utility costs, whether it is water, energy, and of course, some of the issues with regard to our exports. The other issue is about the regulatory burden. This comes number 2 in terms of the different surveys, the information we are getting across all businesses, and not only in the manufacturing sector, but across the different sectors that we are seeing in the country. So there's numerous regulators. Every other time there's a new regulator being established, increasing regulatory requirements on companies. We're actually estimating, and we have a draft survey that is currently undergoing validation, that the minimum number of regulators per manufacturing sector is about 18 to 19 different regulators who you have to comply with if you want to enter into the manufacturing sector. And that's quite a high number of regulatory requirements and compliance. And what we've actually seen is that the more the regulators, and especially impacting the SMEs, the lower the compliance rates. The other issue is about tax administration issues. Again, we put them also with as part of regulatory issues. We are having a number of challenges. One of the key challenges is about our tax legacy issues, that they are backdated, verifications going on, issues to do with refunds. So the whole regulatory burden is quite wide, but we've been able to put out these issues. But the most affected, of course, will be the small and medium-term enterprises. The other issue is about the labor costs. Again, labor costs in Kenya are quite high, but of course, through the wins that we got last year on the reliefs on SHIF and affordable housing, those are some of the things that we are seeing government is listening, and they are trying to see how they can intervene. But we still have issues to do with ceremonial wage increases. And the most impacted, of course, are some of the companies who have large number of employees, and you can imagine what that happens to them and their planning purposes in this country. The other issue is about illicit trade. This is one of the key issues across all the manufacturing sectors that we've listed there. They are complaining about illicit trade. That's affecting, of course, the competitiveness of the local manufactured goods. Of course, it's denying us revenue, and there's a lot of misdeclaration and counterfeits in the market. And this is one of the things we've been working with government. And we actually remember back about almost 4 or 5 years ago, this issue had also cropped up into the Kenyan market, and the government was able to form regulatory, some committees and government agencies to strategically come together to address this. And they were able to actually get revenue in return, and of course address the issues that industry had put forward. The other one is logistics cost. The logistics costs are also going up. If you look at the data out there, issues to do with port delays, issues to do with the county government. There is what we are calling movement taxes in this country, that the county governments are actually charging a lot of taxes and levies and fees to just move across Kenya. And we are seeing that the distribution mechanisms for manufacturers is actually getting impacted because of the increase in charges. And this is one of the things that priority areas that we are trying to put forward this year, so that we can work together with government and we are able to address some of these issues. With regards to the issue of high cost of production, we were able to just show one issue. We just picked a few examples to show you about our competitiveness. And we picked one of the items, the railway development levy. It's one of the import taxes that we charge as a country. You can see the table that we have towards the end on the left side, on my left side, on your right side, how Kenya becomes uncompetitive just because of increasing taxes. But aside from that, there is absence of a price differential for imported raw materials and intermediate products and industrial inputs as compared to final products that are imported into the country. So if you look at what we've written there, just the product groups that are there, you can actually see it's actually cheaper now to import products as opposed to be importing maybe your raw materials and intermediate products or any inputs that you need that are not locally available in this country. So these are some of the data and statistics we are looking at, and we are seeing that if government doesn't intervene to create price differential for raw materials, intermediate products, and some of the inputs which we can't get here locally, we'll still be uncompetitive, and you'll still see more people preferring to trade in Kenya as opposed to setting up manufacturing industries. So the other area is about still on cost of production. This is one example, and it's a good case study. And it's actually a success story for government, that the furniture sector had requested, of course, for government to seek how to encourage more investment in the country because the investment was growing. So we've been telling government that the point of taxation now, domestic taxation, should be on the final products as opposed to the raw materials and intermediate products. So you can see this case of furniture. In 2022, government imposed excise duty on finished imported products. And what we've been able to see from 2022-2023, you can see there's been a 27% increase in terms of the value of exported furniture from local manufacturers, and also in terms of the production percentages. So we are seeing an increase. In 2023, they had about 5.5% in terms of their increase. So this is what we are telling government, that when we've been requesting and recommending from the industry that you charge final products as opposed to the raw material that is used to produce this final product. Otherwise, what we see is that revenue dips when you charge the raw material, and we have an example of one of the sectors where we have actually charged, we've been able to charge, the government charged excise duty on the raw material itself and the intermediate product and the final product. And this was on glass bottles used to produce what is called deodorants in the country. And we actually saw a few investors leave the country just because of how uncompetitive that was. So the recommendation is usually for you to charge taxes on the final product so that you allow the cost of manufacturing to be competitive. The other issue that arises with regard to taxation is the increase in terms of percentage increases that we've seen in the country. One of the things industry has been requesting is that taxation increases should be transitional. It should be for a period of time, as opposed to a sudden increase within a particular period for getting almost 50% or even 100%, and we've seen even others at 300%, even as recent as the Tax Laws Amendment Act, which of course affects business planning. And of course, we continue to see decline in terms of their production, in terms of their exports. So you can see what happens. This is just an example of what is called white refined sugar, not locally available in the country, used by industries in the agro sector. So what happened in 2024 alone? We actually saw an increase in terms of what is called the excise duty on white refined sugar, which is used by all industries in the agro sector. The other issue we saw is that one of the regulators increased their levy. They call it the Sugar Development Levy. So this is what industry is saying when they say there's a high burden of taxation in the country. It's not only on the domestic tax, but it's also levies and fees that come from different regulators. And of course, if you do the calculation at the end of the year, you have been taxed by a regulator, the excise duty or any of the VAT charges have been increased. So at the end of the year, you can see that companies are unable to actually plan their investments and be able to even recoup. And yet these are some of the things that we can address as a country to make sure that we continue to be one of the top destinations for investment. The other issue is about craft paper. This is just one of the products that we use for inputs. Just because of the cost differential, you can see we did a comparison between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, how much taxes they pay. So you can see Kenya has charged an export levy. This is one of the particular items that we don't produce as a country. We actually produce the rest of them, but this one is a bit specific. We haven't built a lot of capacity, but of course we are seeing interest to invest in this sector. You can see what we are calling the import declaration fee at 3% in Kenya. Uganda is charging 1.5. Tanzania doesn't have any tax on that. We have the railway development levy, and this is what you pay when you're bringing your items into Kenya. Kenya is at 1.5, Uganda is at 0. So if you see the total cost of what you need to pay, an investor will actually choose to go to Uganda as opposed to Kenya, which is double even what Tanzania is charging. So we are just looking at a lot of this competitiveness, areas and what Kenya needs to do. And this is what we should be doing as Kenya between government and the manufacturing sector in our closed door rooms, so that we make sure that we are making the right decisions in terms of taxation. And we've shown you an example of furniture, where we are able to actually get taxes, but we are able to grow manufacturing. Another example is on taxation of coal. Again, this is one of the products that was charged just recently in the Tax Laws Amendment Act. It is used by industries that require high energy levels. Of course, we know we have a bit of challenges with regard to energy, its reliability, and a number of those issues. So these are sectors that require high energy. So in the Tax Law Amendment Act, there was an increase in terms of taxes on coal, and you can already see the price differential between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And already now we know where the investors will go. If they are to take some of their steel, cement, large industries that require a lot of energy. So this is one of the things that we need to look at so that we are able to make good decisions, investment decisions for the country. Of course, high cost of energy, this is one of the things that we got a win last year. We are hoping that the implementation will be able to take place in terms of the presidential directive to continue lowering the price of energy for the manufacturing sector. But you can see where Kenya is in terms of the electricity prices per kilowatt in US dollars. We are still one of the highest as compared to our neighboring and competitive countries, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Ethiopia, and this is why their products will always be imported into Kenya at a lower rate, and of course compete with their lower products. And this is the question that, the issue that a lot of Kenyans have been asking. Why is the cost of Kenyan products quite high? It's actually consolidated issues such as high energy costs and some of them. But the good thing is that we are able to see this and we are advancing this together with government. And of course, even their presence here shows their commitment to continue supporting the manufacturing sector. So this is one of the last slides on the regulatory burden. So we have done, there's a draft regulatory study that we are finalizing on. And already we've been able to see what are the top domestic factors constraining farms from the survey that we were doing, and which we will hopefully launch very soon. So you can see what a number of companies are actually saying, that the business environment is one of the key issues. Increased taxation is number 2. You can see it over there. You're also seeing constraints in business financing is also another problem. So we've tried to see what are a number of issues that the industry is complaining about or saying these are the key concerns. But you can see regulatory issues is top across the 3 sectors: manufacturing, services, and agriculture. And services, of course, you have banking, technology, ICT, and these are just similar in the country. So these are some of the things that we have prioritized to try and address. Again, what we are calling regulatory burden across county governments. We picked tea because tea is our top export. And you can see what they have to pay at the county levels. Numerous fees and levies, which some are even similar in terms of what they are being asked to pay. And this is aside from what they are paying domestic taxes. That's VAT, that's excise, that's income tax. You have your import duty that's coming in. So this is what actually our top export earner is required to pay, aside from the taxes. And this is what companies are actually raising concerns about, the increasing taxation. So we need a unified taxation regime of fees and levies across the national and the county governments, so that we're able to address. So you can see this is about 14 different types of licenses. And this is just a few highlights that we were able to put out with the Kenya Tea Growers Association, just to highlight. But they are across all sectors. We've seen in the steel sector how much they're paying in terms of movement taxes, cement industry, what they have to pay to just go across the different countries, and that cost is actually going higher. And we hope that the county governments can also start tracking the ease and the cost of doing business in Kenya so that they can support the national government. Illicit trade, we've just picked a few examples. This is now in the tobacco sector. So what the tobacco sector has been able to put out is that the incidence of illicit in the tobacco and nicotine products has actually grown from 27% to 37%, a 10% increase between 2023 June, within just 1 year, in terms of the illicit trade. And then, of course, what we are also seeing there is that the correlation between increasing taxes and revenue dips. So some of this data just show that we need to make strategic directions now that we are going into the budget session, so that we are able to look at this factual data and make decisions that will be able to support industry, but make sure we are also contributing to revenue that's required for the country. The other product that we picked is alcohol sector. They are estimating now 59% of the total volume of alcohol consumed in Kenya is illicit. Again, this is just a cry for us to be able to put out to the government that we need to prioritize illicit trade in the country, so that we can allow the formal trade or the local industries to be able to thrive. And of course, there are other concerns on safety and a number of issues. This is also another example of the textile sector. You can see how much counterfeit is happening. You can't even tell the difference between their products, but of course the industries are able to tell, comes with similar names. You can see what is counterfeit and what is not. But you, of course, when you pick the product, you can see. We were actually seeing some of the products are even written in foreign languages and not even what is required by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. You can see even the weight. But this is competing in the country. And why this is important is because the education sector is now using this for their crafts. So it has a huge demand within the local, within the country. And yet we are seeing the counterfeited products now being sold to, families who are buying for their school purposes. The issue to do with exports, of course, we have a lot of trade opportunities, and that's why we are able to now attract a lot of investors who can come and set up in Kenya and take advantage of all these markets that we have. AFCFTA, the tripartite will be soon. We have, of course, AGOA that is pending renewal, and we hope that that will happen. The Kenya-EU Economic Partnership. But we decided to just look at Vietnam because it's one of the it's the third leading exporter of textiles and apparel, and we are just picking one sector for us to be able to just demonstrate what we need to do to be able to move our exports to the next level. And of course, what we saw from Vietnam, third leading exporter of textiles in the world, after China and Bangladesh, and of course the value is there. They are also the second largest exporter of cell phones in the world after China. So it looks like it is clear that they have a very clear export strategy. And from what we've been able to peruse from their policies and what they are doing, they have cost competitiveness in terms of their locally produced goods. They have skilled and young workforce, which we have in the country, well-developed infrastructure, which we are trying to also ensure that we have in the country, and it's ongoing, enhanced market access in Kenya.
As a country, and I'm telling you, see, we have data. It can work. We are having today. How can we be intentional when we get back to the offices? Whether we are from government, whether we are the ones with the money, or whether we are the ones running this organization, or partaking in any regulatory framework also. So at KAM, we really want to launch this because I think if we anchor everybody's conversation with this purpose and with this
agenda.
This annual event of Manufacturing Priority Agenda, and we did discuss a number of issues again, and we are here to look at what is happening. So I think that from where I stand, where we left off last year was the issue of our global competitiveness. And so I've really liked what Miriam Bomet has presented here in terms of the Kenyan sector of manufacturing and how we are doing regionally. And as government, what we know is that if Kenya was a car, then manufacturing would be the engine for that car. And you know that if the engine is working well, then the car will work well. If the engine is not working, it does not matter how well we paint the bodywork of that car. So really we are here to have very open and candid discussions about how we grow our manufacturing, the dynamics, because this is a very dynamic and also fairly complex area for us. If I was just to give a short context in terms of where are we standing globally, so that we then start to appreciate as we come down to, we all know, I mean, this is our sector, that the first industrial revolution took place in the UK in 1740. That is 300 years ago. And from UK, this industrial revolution then migrated to the rest of Europe. And when the Europeans then migrated to the Americas, that industrial revolution followed them. And they introduced it there, both in North America and also in the Southern Americas. As we all know, the cost of production, which we are talking about here, within Europe and even in the US, became quite high. So part of the reason why China became a major manufacturing hub was really Europe was relocating its manufacturing to a cheaper manufacturing site. So a lot of the American companies, a lot of the European companies, then moved their manufacturing to India, to China, and eventually Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Philippines, all in the process of looking for cheaper manufacturing space. What I'm happy with in that space then is that although China, India were cheaper manufacturing sites, they actually took the stick and ran away with it. So today, China is not a cheap manufacturing site, India is not, but they started their manufacturing because the Americans and the Europeans were running away from high costs of production in their own environment. So what we have seen then is that the industrial revolution that started 300 years ago in the UK, going into the rest of Europe, into Americas, has really visited other places, has visited Asia, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, India, China. One of the things that we agree is that this manufacturing has actually forgotten to visit Africa. So as much as we talk, before we come to Kenya, we know that manufacturing has visited all the regions of the world, and it's yet to visit Africa. Why am I saying this? I'm saying like this because if you look at the African population, 55 countries, we have a population of 1.4 billion people. We are 17% of the world, but our share of manufactured products in the global scene is 2.8, is 3%. So 17% of the world manufacturing 3%. Let's look at Europe. If you look at Europe, Europe is only 9%. There's 27 countries of Europe account for 9% of the world, but their share of manufactured products is 24%. So somebody is eating our cake. And so as we look at, and to even put it in more context, part of the challenge that we have, and that's why, and I'm coming very briefly to the government policy, look at another statistics, that 55 countries of Africa doing business with each other, we are only doing 15%. Intra-Africa trade accounts for 15%, meaning that Africa is doing more business with others, with China, with India. If your intra-Africa trade is 15%, it means that Africa trading with other global areas is 85%. But what are we trading? We are either selling raw materials, oil, manganese, lithium. What are we trading? We are not selling finished products. We are selling raw materials. But we are buying finished products. So if 85% of our business is with other people, and this business is about us buying finished products and selling them raw materials, then we can also see why we have the challenge of poverty, why we have the challenge of unemployment, and that is exactly why we are here to say that then how do you grow? For example, if I was to give you a statistic, that the total manufacturing in Africa put together, 55 countries, from South Africa all the way to Morocco, is only 10% of what China is doing. So China does, of course, Kenya, we all know about our strategic location in terms of the Indian Ocean, and over the Indian Ocean, and also the fact that we have a port that serves the region. We have a lot of these agreements that we have talked about, the EAC. The EAC has its challenges in terms of the dynamics, non-tariff barriers, and issues like that. We are now part of the AFT, non-tariff barriers, and issues like that. We are now part of the AFTA. There's the issue. There's the issue of the European Union. We've just signed the doing to take advantage, because these things come at very high cost. Negotiations. We are discussing negotiations with the US on STIP. But we open up this market. We know what has happened under AGOA. We have not even done 1% of AGOA. And we want AGOA to be extended. So what? So what did we do with the AGOA that we have had? So part of the discussion here that we also need to have is, yes, the government is doing its part, negotiating these agreements, but what is going to happen under those kind of agreements? The other issue that I want to mention very, very quickly, and then I will end, is part of why Kenya is very competitive is because of our infrastructure. You know the SGR, you know the road network. If we compare ourselves with our region, and this infrastructure, of course, doesn't come free of charge. So sometimes, as we think about the cost of doing business, we also know that infrastructure is good. You want the railway to work, you want the roads to work. These come at a cost, and so we now must be in partnership with you, that as we open up this infrastructure, yes, somebody has to pay for it, and unfortunately, we must make our contribution. We are also doing, I think, and the SCS will tell you, now the Dongo Kundu, which we have been talking for a long time, now is being developed, the industrial sheds, Naivasha, all these, the KIPes. We are spending 5 billion shillings every year to develop the county aggregation and the industrial parks. Why? Because you have seen it for yourself that a lot of our counties are not doing their bit in terms of manufacturing. So mine, really, as I conclude, is to say that manufacturing is a fairly complex area. We appreciate the work that you have done to put Kenya on the global map of manufacturing. We, as government, we have a lot of meetings, deep dives every week on cement, on steel, on pharmaceuticals with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We understand the issues, but these are also, of course, very complex. As we talk now, we are in the process of making the Finance Bill 2025-2026, and we are always going to listen to you. We come up with very good proposals, but you also know that in the taxation arena, there are very many players. So sometimes we sit with Tobias and his team, we agree very well on what we need to do, but what comes out sometimes of Parliament is very different from what we proposed. And unfortunately, although we are always blamed for the taxation that comes out, what really comes out of Parliament, you people have a role to play, either individually. So we come up with a nice proposal, we take it to Parliament, and then many of you again sneak through the back door, give us something that we did not propose, and then you say, this is what government has done. We have no interest in those things. You know that the taxation that ends up coming out is really your work. So I think as what I would like to say is, I think we also we need to put our house in order. These taxations that come out of Parliament, the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry really has no interest, because we talk with you, we agree this will go like this, it goes to Parliament, and then what we get out of it sometimes is very different. And partly I would like to say that we really must put our house together on that. So with those many, many remarks, please let's be upstanding to invite our CS for Investments, Trade and Industry, Honorable Lee Kinanjui, to address us and also to address these issues.
Thank you very much. Kindly take your seats. Thank you very much, Bwana PS Mukwana. He's our PS for industry, and I think all the data he has given is really what he works for, and I want to thank him for that. So the chairperson, the board of CAM, members present here today, and all the other representatives of government who have come here. Allow me to also acknowledge my predecessor, Betty, for the good work you did and for which we continue to progress. Thank you very much. So I want to probably start by saying I'm fairly new in the industry to the extent that at the ministry level, but on issues to do with trade, we have them at the county level. I've been in the road sector, so I saw it from a road perspective and infrastructure and so on and so forth. And I was just comparing the discussions we had maybe 10, 15 years ago and today. I know it's easier to see what has not been done and less of what has actually been done. But I want to start by saying when I was in roads, our biggest issue was our connectivity to the East African nations. So if you think Namanga, if you think going to Tanzania, Uganda, all those places, and I think the president then was very focused on ensuring that Kenya connects to those countries. And now you're sure you can send your cargo to Tanzania, to Uganda, to Rwanda. I think the only country you have not fully succeeded is maybe Ethiopia. There are some sections we need to connect. But the purpose of that was that manufacturers can now plug into those economies and start selling our products into Ethiopia, Uganda, and all those other countries. So to that extent, I think the government has done its part, and we need to do much more though. There was also another issue then. We didn't have the SGR then. So again, there was complaints about reliable transport system, the medium gauge, and I remember many of those meetings. Today we have the SGR. We had to introduce a railway development levy for that to be done, but the truth is we have a reliable system and so on. So I'm saying I think over time a lot has really been done. I recall some 10 years ago the hospitality industry in Nairobi was saying it's impossible to have a conference in Nairobi. You fly from South Africa and take 3 hours to get to your hotel in Nairobi. The expressway has answered that question. So there are certain things that have happened, but in acknowledging them, we also must say much more still needs to be done to make Kenya more competitive and to ensure that our products can actually go out. There are two areas that I also think we must now work with a bit of concerted effort. And I think the first one is the cost of energy. I think the tables here on the cost of energy, Kenya ranking on the upper side, there can be no excuse to that. And I think as government, we have to bite the bullet at the right time. We entered into agreements that didn't put the country first, which again alludes to our chronic disease of integrity and other issues, and whatever you call it. But as a result, everybody has to pay for it. Whether it's industry, hospital, school, we are all paying for it. And I think as government, there must be a time when we should sit and say that a whole nation, 50 million people, cannot suffer because of a few who did this. And I think action should be taken, that future actions of that nature that continue to undermine the nation and make it uncompetitive should not be repeated. And I think we have no apology in that, because that's the only way. I visited some of our East African countries, and when they are talking about where they are more competitive than us, the first thing they cite is the cost of energy. And of course, for us now, we cite political stability, you know, and predictability and democracy and elections, you know, those sort of issues. So allow us also to have energy as something to boast about in the outside world. The other issue is multiple taxes, especially between counties. You have a distribution company in Thika and has to, you know, so you have to pay across all these counties. So I think at our devolved level, there's serious work to be done. So that you can have one pass that allows you to go through the whole country. It's not even how much you will pay, but that it becomes difficult. I was being told of bread, if you advertise on one side, you pay, behind you pay, the other side you pay. So it's become very difficult. Even if you have a school, you have to pay for the signage, the school sign and everything. So I think we've also become irrational in our quest to increase revenues of the county. And I think an honest conversation with the Council of Governors may be necessary in order to address those issues. But to the fundamentals of the day, allow me first to commend CAM for the report. I think it's very informative. There are some good steps that we have seen, but also others where we need some work to be done. In the area of industry, I want to borrow from what's happening to the US. I think after the US president took over, his whole conversation has all been about tariffs. And that is because he appreciates that that lever is so strong, it can lift a nation. It can bring employment, it can create wealth, it can do everything. Luckily, maybe for their system, they are able to do it through presidential decrees. But I think our system is still lacking in many ways. So if you want to have proposals, first maybe they will come and listen to the ministry. Mukwana will have all the data. That's our parliamentary system. Then they will listen to CAM's official position. Then there'll be other associations that will finally come. Then after that, there'll be a public participation where maybe you go to KICC and you're asking people to comment on macroeconomic issues. And these are people who are probably working after not getting a job at the industrial area. So they are now being asked to give, and their opinions finally count. And again, there's another set of people who, after all this has been given, will finally visit this process in their own way. The product of this is a concoction that is actually killing the nation. And I think we must agree, until we resolve this part, because the other thing that every industrialist is saying, how can we have, you don't know what taxes will be there next year, the other year you don't know, yet you have taken a bank facility for 10 years, but you only are sure of the next 12 months, and you have to service your loan for 20 years. So if we say that there's a challenge within the industry, it's because our planning, our structure of planning is not necessarily informed by the best choices. Then secondly, it is very short-term. Yet industrial investment is long-term. It's 20, it's 30 years, it's 40 years. So until we adjust on both sides, then we are likely to have this kind of mismatch. And I think is a matter I would invite CAM together with all the stakeholders in the country to have an honest conversation on how we can probably have a bit of maybe 3-year, 4-year cycles, patterns that we can talk about. Because even some of the foreign investors who are coming to me, they're asking me, okay, what's your tax on this? What's your tax on this? But my answer is only as true as the next 10 months, maybe 4 months. So how does that person come to invest? So I think there's an issue there. There's a cloud of uncertainty that we must fix. And also to request that we make tax proposals based on national interests, not on a particular person interest, not on a particular factory interest. And I am aware sometimes, even when we make very good policies here, because at the East African community, there's also some agreement, there are also delegations that go there to even negate, some of the things we're trying to do here. So, dear Kenyans, the people, the young men who are jobless and traveling to the UAE to become houseboys and housegirls and watchmen are a product of some of the things we have done. So we must have a moment of reflection, correct? Because Kenya has everything. We have the weather, we have an educated population, we have the political stability, but in between, there's a culture that we must address. And this culture exists at all levels. I was asking Madam Chair, the credibility of our data. When you say, for example, manufacturing is going down, how is this data gotten? We get this data by asking somebody, how many mabatis did you produce this year? Yet we know many of us have a number of books. So for the bank, we present this set. For KRA, we present this set. For government, this set. And for Kenya Association of Manufacturers, when you want to discuss about tax policy, another set. So even as you say it has gone down or up, sometimes it's good to know which particular set are we talking about. So also, government would want to make decisions based on credible data. And I want to ask, there is no country that can make progress without data. So that we know, for example, our official data shows that cement production dropped maybe in the last 3-4 years. But wait a minute. This is when our biggest skyscrapers have actually come. Even in the year when the expressway was actually built, which was the biggest consumption you can imagine, on record, cement production dropped. So I think all you're trying to say as policymakers, let us get credible data. And with credible data, it's very easy to deal with these issues. So that we know the big problem is here. And the opportunities in Kenya, if you ask me, is so huge. I have had the opportunity in my short 2.5 month stay to talk to some of our neighbors, and I see, I mean, I was in Ethiopia, for example. Their supermarkets are full of products from other countries. I was happy to see Del Monte, Brookside, don't you know, Farmer's Choice, and a few others. But all the others are from across. And in 2 days from Nairobi, your truck will actually be there. So the opportunities are so huge. So let us agree, let us sort the small mess that is here. And I think it's a national mess. Let's not imagine it's not just about you, because we don't trust each other. Even our children don't trust us. We also don't trust them. So is that trust, you know, when truth is exiled, many things happen. And I think that's really where we need to work on. On another matter, is just maybe to mention something on global dynamics. I think the PS did allude to this. There's a lot of tariff conversations going on, and as a country, we'll put our best case forward with the United States. And I think next week we are having a conversation with the policymakers on that side, so that our textile industry can be protected and that we can be able to grow this. But also, while talking about that, it's also good to agree that like last December, there was in the budget proposals, stuff like that, there was sneaking of something that made text imported and tumba zero rated. So again, for somebody our LAPSET corridor remains one of the biggest unexplored opportunities. It links us to southern Sudan and also to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a 140 million population. Recently, they imported fertilizer through the port, and I'm happy that the MD of the port is here. Our main port, Mombasa, is doing very well, but we need to do much, much more in Lamu. It took over 2 months for them to evacuate their fertilizer, which means really, if you know, the rains will have come, you no longer need it. But their port of choice is actually Lamu. It is 800 kilometers less than their current option. So they are coming here in the coming month, and they would want us to have a conversation around how to operationalize Lamu, ensure there is safety, and also the business community to come and plug in. When government makes these huge investments in ports and roads and so on, those investments will mean nothing if the private sector does not take advantage of that investment. So as we work together with the Kenya Ports Authority and the Ministry of Transport, there is a need for the private sector to also align itself so that we can see more and more of our products use that particular corridor, and that we can be able to achieve our desired economic goals. We have also entered into critical agreements with UAE, among many other countries, but as our PS has said, our utilization level of those agreements is in the 10 to 15%. So again, with all this arable land, with all this capital, I was speaking to the banks yesterday, and they told me they have so much money to lend, they're lacking someone to, you know. So where is the missing link in all this conversation? Government has opened those markets. We are ready to connect you on infrastructure. And therefore, I really want to challenge. The industry of 20, 30 years ago must align itself to the challenges of today. To think global, act local in terms of addressing the challenges. And I think even us as government, we have to be now outward looking. And I think through all this, Kenya can play a very critical role. We have a very strategic port in Mombasa. If you want to compare it with all over Africa, I think, apart from Cairo, I think you cannot have a better port. So if you produce from Dongo Kundu, which is a project we are trying to come up with, geared for exports, you can go to India, you can go to the Gulf, you can go to Europe, you can go almost anywhere. And for this reason, we really want to encourage the industries in Kenya to obviously support the local demand, but I think more importantly, to have a global outlook. And this is how we are going to make sure that we are able to harmonize all the benefits that the government has done. It's enough dose for today, but to assure you of our support, CAM and all the manufacturers in the country. I have also been trying to look at financing for industries. As I said, industry is a long-term investment. You can't go to a bank at 15% and borrow for 20 years. You will not be able to make it. So I think there are also conversations within government to see how we can be able to create a specific fund for long-term and also low interest so that we can be able to encourage growth and also expansion of the existing industries. We have seen recently, as a result of some of this mischief in some of our tax policies, products imported into a neighboring country and then eventually being re-imported into our country. And then later we have data of declining exports to country A or country B, but actually what happened is that that cargo came directly, say, to Uganda, and then it was brought finally to Kenya, and now it is declared as an export from that particular country. So I think let us agree, those schemes won't take us very far. Let us look for what is in the best of the country, best of the future of this nation, and together we can make it. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Another round of applause for our chief guests. All right. And Bonasias, as much as we'd like for you to sit down, it's not time yet. It's the moment that we've all been waiting for. We'd like for you to rise kindly. There's a gentleman called Lawrence who will be coming next to you just to show you what is going to take place. We need to officially launch the 2025 Manufacturing Priority Agenda. And you will be joined, of course, by PS Juma Mkhwana, the Secretary, Stephen Odua, the whole Kenya Association of Manufacturer Board. Let's have Miriam Bomet as well. This is your child. Miriam, where are you? Okay, Miriam. Miriam will be joining as well. And of course, Honorable Betty Maina. Ma'am, kindly. And of course, it's a big day for the sector as a whole. Okay. Let's have our countdown on the screen, not to start yet. Just on the screen, we'll be having our countdown. It's an important day for the sector, important moment for the sector as a whole. And for all of us, we will be counting down together from 5 down to 1, and the CS is going to... booklet, which definitely has the 2025 manufacturing sector outlook and the manufacturing priority agenda. Let's all remember that each year the Kenya Association of Manufacturers develops the manufacturing priority agenda to highlight the critical interventions. Lawrence is organizing the photo session. It's a beehive of events right there. And immediately after, we'll be having our panel discussion. I need to prepare you for that. A photo session over there going on with the chief guest, that is Cabinet Secretary Lee Kinyanjui, Principal Secretary Juma Mkhwana, Secretary Stephen Odua, the whole Kenya Association of Manufacturers Board, Miriam Bomet, the Head of Policy and Regulatory Advocacy, and former CS and former CEO, Honorable Bete Maina, and of course all the other stakeholders in this particular sector. There are 5 seats on set. That is our chief guest has left the building, but our conversation continues. We are getting into the panel discussion with immediate effect. We're getting into the panel discussion with immediate effect. There's some time, maybe another 2 minutes before we check. Okay. It's about time we transition to the panel discussion. Most of our panelists. We're getting into our panel discussion. We'll be having very able panelists, by the way. Key representatives.
The link for the speeches, full speech.
Yes.
One. The speeches, without any especially this, yes.
Yes.
I don't know.
From Miriam.
Likely what she presented is in the document, the MPA.
What's that?
Yes, yes, yes. It's actually.
That's okay. Look, document is in software.
Yes, yes, the document is being posted now.
So I can tell you.
So there's Milan. What is, I don't know how it is. Jane is over there.
Yeah, I can start calling.
Okay. I think that those few minutes were necessary for some of us who were not able to get something to eat earlier to actually serve themselves. Please do enjoy your breakfast and ensure that you have the NPA with you, the booklet. If you've not received your booklet, please do raise your hand. Everyone has the booklet? Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So let's quickly transition into our panel discussion. And allow me to call you on stage. Dr. Vimal Shah, Executive Chairman at Bidco Africa. Please, naomba tumpigie makofi hadi afike. Let's get that into our culture until we come to the end of this event. We're going to clap for them until they come on stage. Farthest end. Okay. Let's also welcome Mr. Maurice Ore. Maurice, tumpigie makofi. Again, if you have coffee, you know, give someone that side, eh? So that when they speak to us and give us knowledge, they give it all. Let's also have John Wenda's representative. Apologies for that sound. It's a light hitch. John Wenda's representative, when he gets here, we'll have to have him introduce himself. Apigiwe makofi pia. Unless you're eating, I don't see why there should be a problem with clapping, surely. Yeah, thank you. Madam Jane Ndungo. Jane, I will clap for you very much because she will be the only lady on stage with us. Jane, of course, is from the External Affairs for East Africa and Amaram Sefel Group. If we can remove one table. Correct. Okay. Dr. You can sit at the end. So we have Dr. Steve Anyona Makambi, who's an economist. We also have Dr. Vimal Shah, the executive chairman at Dr. Vimal Shah, the executive chairman at Bidco Africa. Next to Vimal, we have Maurice Ore, the Deputy Commissioner, Policy and Tax Advocacy. Following suit is our representative from Can Invest. When he gets the microphone, he will introduce himself properly. And finally, the only lady on stage, that is Madame Jane Ndungo, who is the head of External Affairs at East Africa Amaram Sefal Group. Apologies for that. Okay, I'd like us to just get right into it, and of course we'd like to start off with Maurice Carey. Maurice, if you just get your microphone, after I ask you the question, you can introduce yourself as you please.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Maurice Urei. I'm a Deputy Commissioner, Policy and Tax Advisory at Kenya Revenue Authority. On the question you have asked, I would say it's a very relevant question for purposes of this discussion. And probably to answer the question, let's go back to how we introduced the withholding VAT. Withholding VAT was introduced sometimes in the 90s. And the objective of the withholding VAT was basically to ensure that we keep a trail of the businesses that were trading, particularly with the government, because the government was the only withholding urgent. At that time, it was 16%. Then in 2000, around 2008, we suspended the withholding VAT because of the reason that it was actually having an effect on the cash flow for businesses. However, we noted that after the suspension of the withholding VAT, compliance level again went down. So it was decided in 2013, 2014, thereabouts, to reintroduce withholding VAT at a lower rate. The rate that was put at that time was 6% of the value of the supply. Again, we noted the same challenge of cash flow problems for businesses. And I remember at that time I was in the budget team, and CAM actually had proposed that we reduce it from 6% to 4%. But given the considerations that we looked at from a policy perspective, we noted that even 4% is high. Mm-hmm. So we put it at 2%. And we expected that with 2%, it was minimal and the issue of cash flow problems will not arise. Now, it is still at 2%. Now, the question that you are asking, should we reduce it to 1%? Mm-hmm. It's a logical question from my point of view. And even the issue of removing it altogether is also logical, given that we are now piloting fully automated systems. The challenge we have is that still the compliance in terms of the other sectors, probably manufacturers are complying, is still low. But the issue of reducing it to 1% is a policy matter that can be considered if that kind of proposal has been submitted to Treasury.
Okay.
It's something that can be looked at. I can't say we can't remove it altogether. Mm-hmm. So I suggest that this is the budget period. I believe that there are proposals that are sitting in Treasury on that basis. So in a nutshell, I'm saying that your sentiments are realistic and there are things that can be addressed through the budget process because we have to amend the law. Others, thank you very much.
All right, and thank you, Maurice. Now, Jane, I'd like to come to you. If you have, by the way, anything that you'd like to add on to what Maurice has said, feel free. But my question to you is, how can Kenya balance the need for revenue generation, especially when it comes through taxation, while ensuring a business-friendly environment for manufacturers?
Thank you very much. And maybe to comment on what Maurice has said is that the discussion is very welcome. The discussion is very welcome to reduce the withholding tax by another 1%. It will come to unlock a lot of money, which is currently being withheld by other taxpayers. Then on the issue of how can Kenya balance the need for revenue generation through taxation while ensuring a business-friendly environment for us manufacturers, I must say it's a very tricky and complex challenge that Kenya finds itself in, because the needs of the country compared to the revenue that the country is looking at, they are far apart. But that does not mean that the few people who pay the taxes are the ones that are to bear the burden. So the encouragement we would like to give is that if we can motivate more manufacturers to come into the country, or motivate the current manufacturers to expand so that they can be able to employ more people, so that they can be able to utilize a lot of manufacturing inputs, and that spurs the economy. Even when you have more people who are employed, they pay more taxes to the government. And the corporations, once they do well, they also pay more corporate taxes to the government. So the first thing is first to ensure that whatever tax proposals that are ongoing at the moment, we beg for them to be stable and to be for the long term, so that we can be able to plan with a stable environment. We can be able to see the growth trajectory that we are planning for shall come to be, and it will not collapse within 1 year. Then we're also saying that give tax incentives. For example, what Boris Ore has alluded to is an incentive, so that you know your money is not being withheld by the other taxpayers, and the government trusts that their automated systems are going to netting more taxpayers. Therefore, the few people who are already paying taxes, they don't feel punished for doing that. We're also saying that we also need to see these taxes that we are paying, can we also have confidence that they are doing something? Because at the end of the day, we still produce and we still have to take these products out of the company and to the final destination. So if it is infrastructure development, I know the country has been very proud of the expressway and Dogokundu and all other superhighways, but we are seeing even the small roads that lead to the market, the small roads that lead from the factory to the market, they also need to be made so that we can feel that we are not spending extra money trying to address our logistical costs and logistical challenges.
Okay.
We're also saying that as much as the manufacturers are doing a good job to produce quality products, we are also seeing a lot of imported products coming to the market. Yet when you look at the products, it's very clear that these are products that can be produced locally. How can we create a differential such that whatever is coming from out of the country can be taxed in such a way that one would have to really make a decision. Do I import or do I buy locally? And the decision would be they can buy locally because then it's much cheaper than importing the same product from out of the country.
All right.
Then as I finish, I know we also have a lot of the substandards and illicit trade that was alluded to in the presentation by Miriam. And we are saying that these products are taking up a market share that they don't deserve. Why can't we protect those legitimate manufacturers who are producing to be able to enjoy the market share that they are developing other than other products coming to eat that share? Thank you.
And thank you, extremely informative, Jane. Allow me to switch gears and address Dr. Vimal. Now, Dr. what incentives should be introduced, and this is of course according to you, to encourage investment in agricultural value chains that support industrial growth? We are using, by the way, in case you're shocked, it's not like we are low on microphones. No, we just need to use that one because of recording purposes, and I hope that's okay with you. Okay, carry on, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I think the first issue is, I think it's been said earlier today, that we need to be globally competitive. Now, whatever we do in the agriculture, manufacturing value chain, what we need to do is adopt a full value chain, end-to-end, value chain approach. When we do that, we will actually see how the local value added in every product will really help. Unfortunately, what's happened even in the agriculture value chain is we are now putting in taxes and levies. I said taxes and levies at every county, every place, where even just for registration for a farmer, we have to pay a fee. And all these, I'll call it the license Raj. Remove the license Raj. The license Raj means there are 15 or 17 licenses for everybody to have, and all they've done is paid a fee, got a license, paid a fee, got a license. A license is just a paper to say I paid the fees. But those, whatever bodies, are not adding any value. Every agriculture value chain, if I just take the nuts and oil seeds system right now, it's a crazy thing. Every farmer has to register with NOCD, pay a fee. Then every transporter who carries agriculture produce has to pay a fee, get registered. And I think it's the whole thing. If you start trading in agriculture products with the oil crops, whatever, and the designated items there, you've got to be registered. We've gone digital. If we've gone digital, we could have one simple KYC registration system, which KRA already has, authenticate that and make it happen. We don't have any of these taxes or fees. So the whole agriculture value chain, we are making our raw material, which is our produce for manufacturing, more expensive in Kenya compared to what we would get from elsewhere. Hence, if you see milk in Uganda is half the price in Kenya compared to Kenya. What's wrong with it? Our milk is the same, our milk is good, but the cost of production and the overall levies they're paying. Eggs in Uganda are half the price compared to Kenya. And when they come here, we start saying, let's put a tax on them because they're East Africa. So I'm just saying, when we look at a lot of things, it's our competitiveness. Competitiveness means everything that is hampering the value chain from end to end. And when we do that, we can actually see that. So we could have an exemption or a tax exemption or whatever, levy tax exemption for anything locally manufactured from local agriculture products. We could do that. That's not number one. Number two, what is agriculture? Agriculture is the sun. We've got the free sun. It's water and water management, and also the nutrient management. So the nutrients are the fertilizers or whatever we add to it, and then the planting material. So we've got to increase our yield per acre, yield per hectare. When we benchmark with the whole world, our yields per acre or yields per hectare are very low in Kenya. Why? Because of productivity. Now, extension services are not prevalent at all for farmers. So what we have to do is get private extension or whatever, or go to YouTube University and learn how to do extension from there. So I think this is one very important point. Second thing is, when you add value to the products here and you add packaging and all that stuff, there's a tax. I'm sorry, KR is here. There's a tax for every single thing. If you actually put it into a plastic bottle, there's another tax there. If you do local fruit processing, again a tax on it. Why can't we remove all that and say, fine, here, in the end product, there's a VAT. Please just charge the VAT and account for it. So I'm just saying, we've got to get away from looking at making the raw material so expensive that it's not feasible. If you talk about many other products, it's cheaper to import the wheat. It's cheaper to import the maize and process it rather than get it done locally. So I just think that it's competitiveness. I could go into many things, but I think agriculture and value adding to agriculture needs to be a priority. What we see in government, and I'm happy that the CS today addressed it, that we have a mess in government. I think the mess is that we are not sure whether we want to be a trading nation or we want to be a manufacturing nation. I think this is the first thing. We've got to decide. We had a meeting with the MP's Finance Committee this week, and they said that we must take care of traders first and then manufacturing comes second. Now, if that's the agenda, then let's decide here once and for all that let's take all manufacturers to Uganda or Tanzania. You've seen all the figures. 0, 0, 0 duties. And here we are doing more and more taxation. So I think decide once and for all, because one thing for sure, we will not stop consuming. We've all had breakfast today. We'll continue doing this. How many of those items will be from local products or how many will be from imported products? It's a clear idea. Number two, we have the soil, we have the sun, we have people who are unemployed. We can do so much more, but we just have to make it competitive.
Okay. Well, before I head on to Dr. Steve Makambi, Maurice, would you have anything to respond to what Dr. Vimal has said?
Thank you very much. First of all, I've got to say that the comments by Dr. Bimal are very valid, because as a government, our interest is to ensure that we become a manufacturing and not a trading nation. But the question that then we need to ask ourselves, why can't we be a manufacturing nation? Is it because of taxes? Because when you talk of agriculture, agricultural produce under the VAT Act are exempt. They are exempt. And that's the kind of incentive that we are giving. So could it be that the problem is somewhere, not on taxes? Can I tell you something? About 2 weeks ago, I traveled to Arusha. When I was coming back at the border, I found that there's a very long queue of lorries coming from Tanzania. I went to our office and asked them, how comes I don't see lorries coming from Kenya to Tanzania, but there are a number coming from Arusha? They told me, because probably they don't understand that is good for us because we are collecting VAT. Then I said, but what are you collecting VAT on? And these are mostly raw materials. Then I told him, but if they are raw materials for manufacturing, then I should expect also lorries going back to Tanzania for the manufactured products. Yeah, then he realized that that is where we lose. So what is the problem? Because we are getting raw materials from even neighboring countries and we are adding value. So how comes that we still complain that we are going to be a trading nation? Where could be the problem? And that's what I'm asking. Is the problem really tax, or there are underlying costs that probably need to be addressed?
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
I'd like for you to please hand over the microphone to your extreme left, to Dr. Steve Makambi. Daktari, what structural reforms that are needed to help Kenyan manufacturing remain competitive globally, especially after all the sentiments you've heard thus far?
Okay, thank you. First, my name is Makambi. I'm from Kenyatta University. We are as partners with Kenya Association of Manufacturing through our hub called Kenyatta University Women Economic Empowerment. Okay, I want to address the issue, and first I have to say to why are people pointing on taxes? It's more about the approach rather than the spirit behind the taxes. We know we have to pay taxes, but and we know in the short term the government has a budget and it has to raise money. But it is the punitive nature, and there's so many agencies that create such a problem, if I may answer that problem. So for example, it has been pointed out by Miriam that in the tea sector we have 15 levies. In tourism, I know there are up to 31 levies. And before you get to the bureaucratic hurdles and the bottlenecks, and we don't even know some of these pseudo-government agencies that are taxing us and how they are applying that money to change the lives of whatever it is that they are doing. So if we can have, from the structural reform, if we can understand that Churchill said that there is no nation that can tax itself into prosperity. If we can understand that and appreciate that spirit, why can't we have, for example, a one-stop shop? A one-stop shop where we can have attendance of all the regulation and the levies that are supposed to be charged, and they should be explained to what extent are these levies helping us in terms of building a competitive environment and a productive platform. So on the structural reforms, first of all, we must create productive and progressive tax policies and regimes that understand that from a manufacturing side, from the forward direct investment perspective, all government agencies are wearing the same hat. So we do not know that there is this agency that takes care of this. All they are looking at is the return on investment and the extent to which the government is eating into their return on investment. The other issues that we have to address if we want to become globally competitive is the high cost of production in Kenya. We do have a very vibrant and educated labor force. 89% of Kenya, the Kenyan's literacy rate is at 89%, but it is still affordable. But these other issues that bring the high cost of production in Kenya must be addressed so that we can be able to compete globally. So that is something that the government must take care of in terms of creating incentives, subsidies, if possible, to make sure that we expand the tax base. Rather than tax the people who are already there heavily, we would rather expand the tax base by creating subsidies and incentive for people to grow and then have a wider tax base. We have to focus on widening the tax base rather than punishing the ones who are there.
All right.
Then let me just finish by saying regional, sorry, just 1 minute.
That's fine, that's fine.
We must, the CS said we must think globally but act locally. While we are focusing on our own problems, I believe the Kenya's comparative advantage lies in our leadership position in the Eastern African region. We should think of really positioning ourselves as a manufacturing hub for the Eastern region and create policies that will help us create more integration with us as the leaders and the steward towards taking advantage of 300 million population in East Africa. Thank you.
And thank you. Now, let's now get to Can Invest. Microphone is going to be handed to you, sir, and you'll start off before answering. Of course, you'll have to introduce yourself. Now, with everything that has been said and done, how is Can Invest positioning the country as the most attractive destination for manufacturing investments compared to regional competitors like Ethiopia and Egypt?
Thank you very much. My name is Guracha Adi. I'm General Manager in charge of Investor Services at Can Invest. John, the CEO, has just dashed for another meeting, so I'm sitting in for him. So, Can Invest, our mandate is to promote and facilitate investment in Kenya, and we don't just promote Kenya regionally, but globally. And as a country, we have competitive and comparative advantage over most of our neighbors, considering our liberalized and diversified economy, our labor force with a very excellent work ethic, our green energy, and our wide market access. So as an organization, we've been devising an investment promotion strategy. We've moved from the generic promotion of the country to sector focused, where we ensure that we go to specific targeted investors with sector pitch decks, which we work with various stakeholders. And we work also very well with our Kenyan embassy abroad and foreign embassies in Kenya in terms of showcasing those opportunities existing and what Kenya can offer. But one important factor in the investment life cycle or landscape is once investor chooses to come to Kenya, what is required is the investment facilitation. And so as Can Invest, we have also established a one-stop shop where we ensure that investors don't go from office to office. We have eliminated dealing with multiple agencies and focused on investors getting services under one roof. Now, with all the issues which have been raised, we're also cognizant issues exist. So as Can Invest, we've also embarked on holding roundtables with the investors in specific sectors. And CAM has been one of our major stakeholders in this, so that any issue arising and specifically related on policy, we can push it through, escalate it to right offices. As we have, in Kenya, we have the Kenyan National Investment Council, which is chaired by the president, and it is an escalation mechanism for mostly issues related to policy that requires high-level focus and intervention. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Garaj. Let's give our panelists a round of applause just to give them sight. Yeah? And I'd like to ask any questions from the floor. Any questions before I carry on with my questioning? There you go. And as you ask, we'll start off with name, where you come from, and the question at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you very much, the panelists. I just have a comment to make in response to some of the issues raised. I think you asked why aren't we very competitive, or why are we not performing as a manufacturing sector? I think the right response was given by our colleague Miriam when she talks about the energy cost and also the logistics cost. And I want to speak to the logistics cost. A recent study reveals that the logistics cost to our manufacturing is about 36 to 42%. So we start from a disadvantage already. In Dar es Salaam, because the port is in Dar, then they already have a competitive advantage on that. So what do you need to do as a country? And as my friend Tobias said, we have to be intentional to reduce the cost and to take actions where there's a challenge. From the Shippers Council, where I'm the CEO, we are engaging the Kenya Ports Authority to improve on port productivity, port efficiency, and also to ensure that we do not unnecessarily have cargo staying longer in the port. So there are intentional instruments that the government must take into cognizance. I also want to speak to IDF. Miriam, thank you for saying Uganda and Tanzania does not charge IDF. In Kenya, we have put in a budget proposal, and we'll continue doing that, for the removal of the IDF. Because IDF primarily was to support pre-shipment inspection, which again the manufacturers are still paying for. So you pay IDF, and you also still have to pay for the PVOC to KEBS. So you ask yourself, why must we continue paying for IDF and pay for PVOC? So the government must be intentional to evaluate the fees and charges and ask, what can we do away with and what can we sustain going forward? So the point we want to support, my friend, is we just have to be intentional and take affirmative action to make ourselves competitive. No matter what markets will open, unless we're competitive, we'll continue to being a trading country. And Vimal, thank you for asking the difficult question. Do you want to trade or do you want to manufacture? Do you want to create employment or do you want to export employment? Thank you, and I submit.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for his commentaries. Any other comment, question?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Macharia. I am in the apparel industry, Jedmark Fashion Incubator Limited, but I'm here as a member of CAM. Now, there is a question that keeps coming, and the question is, what is the problem? The CS asked, where is the gap? Where is the gap? And there is something I want to highlight, and I'm trying to make this, to shout about this as loud as possible, so that we understand where we are going wrong. We have heard us talk about China and Vietnam. What is wrong with our apparel industry? Why is it that if you look at everyone here, all of us are wearing imported? There is something that we are not doing right. Apparel may not be very much about taxes and those other things. There is a problem that we must address. And this is about breaking down the production chain. We must break the production chain in our apparel industry. And this is very simple. If you go to China, we have people who call themselves designers, who basically come up with the designs or what have you. And then there is this missing link that we don't have in this country. We call it the pattern making. The patterns are not available in our market, such that for you to enter the apparel industry, you must learn how to make patterns. So what do we need to do? We need to build a pattern-making industry in Kenya. And from very simple things, handkerchiefs, pants, boxer shorts, all those things have to be done intentionally so that we build that gap, that link that is missing, so that anybody with very little money would enter that industry without going to the nitty-gritties of learning how to make clothes. Now, apparel is one of the industries that can easily be done in what we call the cottage industries. We have a problem of our kids doing wanacheza na simu the whole day. You only need to get a pattern for making a product. In your living room, you only need 2 machines. Have the garment cut. Your kids can do that. Any kid who can ride a bicycle can use a sewing machine. No wonder we see exploitation of maybe underage children, but we can make use of the family labor, and have these cottage industries in our homes. And I want to point this that the government had tried these in the 80s and 90s. How many remember we had sewing machines in our houses in the 80s and 90s? Very many homes had those machines. What were they meant for? I want to put it to you that those were seeds that had been planted for the rise of the cottage industries. Unfortunately, we missed that. So I think one of our industry called the apparel industry, something must be done for us to achieve what we want to achieve. Thank you.
And thank you, Macharia. A round of applause for Macharia. Macharia is from the apparel industry. Let's have the beautiful lady at the back. You look very lovely in green.
Thank you, thank you.
Right.
How are you, everybody? My name is Adrian Juma. I am from the textile industry as well. I am the third generation director of Tiankara Creations. And I would just like to add on the comment that he has mentioned from now our story. You see, being the third generation director, meaning there was my grandma and my mom, who has been in these industries from the 1990s. So I've seen them with the sewing machine, and I've seen them going through the challenges that we're having. And they've been doing custom production for all these years, from the 1990s up to about 2020. And that is where now I came in as a third generation, understanding all the challenges that are there. We decided to change our production system into manufacturing. So we started this. One, you find that for us, we didn't have any knowledge of how to start a factory, how to run a factory, how to segment them from the different production categories, but we managed. We didn't get any expertise because we couldn't afford, leave alone just affording an expert. We couldn't get anybody in Kenya who can come and assist us in the knowledge of how to start up a factory and how to run it. That is number one. Number two, I didn't do fashion and design. I did international trade and economics. We are 5 sisters, so only one of us went to fashion school. You find the labor force that we are getting, the students who are coming from these fashion schools in Kenya, they only have a lot of theory. But when they come to the ground and we tell them now, cut this, or rather stitch this garment, they cannot. As you've said, the pattern drafting is very relevant. Right now, the technology in the international market is really advancing. We have the CAD systems. It's not here in Kenya. We've tried and we've managed to access it, but there's no expert who can actually come and train us on how to use the CAD systems, leave alone understanding how expensive that is. How are we going even to keep up with the competition that is happening? So we are talking about let's not just focus first on exporting our products. Look at our local market. There's a very big gap. As you've said, only 5% of Kenyans wear made in Kenya products. So you can imagine the other 95% we haven't even tapped into. So basically, right now we've managed to combat all these issues, but now coming to tax. You see, being a 4-year business, as a cottage business, we started with only 2 operators. In the 3 years, we have about almost 40 employees, youth and women. And the company has grown. We've been submitting TOT, but now we've managed to reach the threshold of submitting VAT. But now here comes the problem. We are supposed to submit the VAT, but the raw materials, especially the fabrics that we are getting locally, and trust me, we've done thorough market research in trying to obtain local fabrics here from Kenya, because when we say made in Kenya, let it start from the fabric to the end product. But we've had an issue from the textile companies that are producing fabrics in Kenya, a lot of issues there. But with the few suppliers that we've gotten, and there's a big market where they're giving Kenyan fabrics, but they don't give us receipts, where now we can't claim the the VAT. So where are we else supposed to get the money to pay the government this VAT? What does that mean? It means closure of the business. It means losing those job opportunities. So again, we are killing these industries, saying, I don't know if there's anybody else who can relate to this, but this is an issue that we are facing.
Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause. Now, before we get to anyone else from the floor, I'd like to turn back to our panelists. Any of us want to respond or even add on to the comment that have been made by our fellow members? Go ahead, Gary.
Yes, thank you very much. Those are very good input into this discussion. I would like to start with the last one because it touches on taxes. The one from Madam Juma. Yes, we are aware that there are a number of challenges, particularly in terms of compliance with the e-teams for the small traders. Because actually the problem that she has is the issue of getting an e-teams receipt from those people who are supplying them raw materials for their work, which I believe are basically from micro traders who may not be able to generate an e-teams receipt. We have tried to find a way around that problem, and I need to advise Madam Juma that the law currently allows you to issue what we call a reverse e-teams, because I believe Madam Juma, having reached the threshold for VAT of 5 million, she is e-teams compliant. So she can issue a receipt not charging VAT. I need that to make that very clear. It doesn't mean that if you issue a reverse e-teams receipt, then you will charge VAT on that person. The reason is what we need is visibility of the small traders who are also doing business. So I would urge Madam Juma maybe to get in touch with the office for purposes of further guidance. But I also need to mention a very important thing that Mr. Macharia raised as far as the challenges that this sector is facing. You know, we have been talking in very general terms. We say that the problem we have is cost of production. But we don't dig deep into what are these costs of production we are referring to, so that we find a way to address them. So, for example, if the challenge is cost of capital, because capital is a major input for production. So how do we need to address it? If it's cost of land, how should it be addressed? So that we become very specific in terms of issues. If it is cost of operations, we mentioned somebody mentioned the issue of logistics at the port. So that we have a very strategic way of addressing the challenges. And I'm happy from the comments from the people who have made submissions. Apart from the comment by Madam Juma, I've not heard that tax is a problem. I'm not saying that because I'm a taxman, but I'm happy that we hear that. Yes. Thanks.
All right. Any other panelists who'd like to give their sentiments on the comments that have been given from the floor?
I think I'll just...
Dr. Vimal?
Thanks a lot. I think issues are apparent. There are issues around tax, but there are issues around competitiveness. And I think it focuses on factors of production. Now, when you look at the whole wage price spiral and the cost of utilities and all that stuff, we're going into a situation where we are becoming uncompetitive. In fact, if you just go for these textiles, there'll probably be imported textiles in Eastleigh where you'll get duty-free, tax-free textiles. You may not know that as KRA because they're not in the KRA purview. A lot of people are there. And they even deliver to your home, right? And all you have to do is pay a certain amount per kilo, whatever. No tax receipt, nothing, and it's delivered to your home. Now, when we look at that in Kenya, it's happening under the purview of KRA, But KRA says we don't see it, so we don't know about it, right? I'm just saying, go and ask consumers, because we ask a lot of housewives. They say, yeah, I get my stuff from China directly. It gets delivered to my house. I don't have to worry about anything. No paperwork, no e-teams, nothing. So I'm just saying the other thing is manufacturers, or even small-scale manufacturers, the cost of administration and working for KRA to get its tax is prohibitive, right? You haven't worked that out. If you work that out, how much administrative paperwork do people have in businesses? If you actually do a survey, you realize that they have probably a team of 3, 4, 5 people just working on making sure we're compliant with tax. So I think we need to simplify this so well and make it digitized. The other problem is digitization in Kenya has become a costly affair, and therefore now people in Eldoret are saying, we don't want any digital stuff. We just want to pay in cash. We don't want even M-Pesa, because now we are being affected by all this. So I'm just saying there are things that you don't see. It's probably, we call it a blind spot. Go off from the blind spots and find out. People may not be complaining about it, but I think it's a legitimate thing, and find out how people consume. Because really, if this, I agree with you. Every household can become a manufacturing zone to do a lot more, production of uniforms or whatever. But then the cost is an issue. So I think this is a big issue, and I think the minister also addressed it. Let's look at what is the mess. Why are we not competitive?
Okay. The microphone to be handed over on this side. To your extreme right. Jane?
Okay, thank you. I just want to chime in on the issue of where are we not competitive, and that is in response to breaking down the issue, because you're asking what's the problem. So I just want to paint a picture of just one element amongst many where there's a problem. So I want to touch on when we produce, of course the products don't stay in the factory, they have to leave and go to the destination. But as a manufacturer, we'll have to pay so many fees from the time that product leaves the organization until at some point you feel like it's doubling the cost already. So we pay even for the showrooms that you see out there. You pay for the branding, whether it's a fascia sign, whether it is a illumination sign, whether it's directional sign, you're going to pay. If it is a trader who has chosen to put your products in their shop, you still have to pay for that signage. If you're going to change the color, refresh the painting, you'll pay for removal and you'll pay for painting. If you have a truck that is going to take that good to the final, as long as it bears your name on it, you will pay for truck branding. If you are doing business at the county, you still have to pay a single business permit. You still have to pay fire compliance. You have to pay canteen licenses. You have to pay waste and garbage collection. You have to pay for billboards and other costs, parking costs, distribution costs. If you're talking about national government, you have to pay for occupational safety and health services. If it is to KEBS, you have to pay application of renewal of your permits, permit for the mark of quality. You have to pay for standards levy. If it is to NEMA, you are paying emission license, effluent license, incinerator license, air emission, radiation license. If it is to other ministries, you are paying land rates, you are paying KRA taxes, all of them, pay as you earn. You are paying SHA, you are paying NITA. I mean, do I really need to go on? So we have demarcated right from the time you bring your raw materials into the factory to the time the consumer holds that product in their hands. And in our case, it is to the time that roofing sheet is on top of the house. So there are so many charges that we are paying until by the time that product is in the hands of the rightful owner, you are completely tired. After you finish that process, you start again looking to be refunded. All the inputs that you brought bears a VAT on them. And all the sales that you have made bears a VAT onto them. And when we subtract, we need to be refunded for the input cost. Again, you start a whole process of following that money. When it doesn't come, what does a manufacturer do? A manufacturer is in the business to produce and make sure they don't lose their market share. So you'll go to the bank, you will borrow money so that you can come and finance that gap as you continue following for your refunds. So that is the situation we find ourselves in. And at the same time, you are competing with products that have come that can be produced locally. At the same time, you are competing with substandard products which have not seen the eye of the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and yet they are occupying a space in the market that legitimate products should be occupying. And who is the ultimate bearer of all these costs? It is you and me. Because when you go and buy that product, you will buy the product plus all these costs that I've talked about. So we know very well why we are not competitive. The question is, why can't we address in a timely manner? And some of the policies that are put in place, they take almost 1 year to be implemented. Yes, the policy has been given through the Finance Act. The Act allows you to enjoy certain benefits, but administratively, it has not been corrected or it has not been streamlined in the systems. So you can't have this until it is streamlined. And that's the question that really we should be addressing. Besides passing the policies that are attractive, how do we make it immediately working and beneficial to those it was intended to benefit? Thank you.
All right, and thank you. Adni, do you have anything to add on to that? Garage? No? All right, Dr. Makambi? Okay, fantastic. Now I'd like to just throw a question each your way. I'll start off with, of course, the farthest from me, which is Dr. Makambi. If you could just hand over the microphone to him before now we get back to the floor. So what are the biggest economic and policy challenges of the manufacturing sector? Of course, a lot has been said already, but what are the biggest policy challenges when it comes to the manufacturing sector in Kenya, the ones that, of course, that we are facing, and what are the immediate interventions that are needed to address them? And as you give that answer, you can also give us your final remarks, unless now we go back to the floor for any more questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think as it has been echoed by everyone today, the biggest bottlenecks are the harsh competitive environment in terms of regulation and taxes. That is one of the biggest and most painful when it comes to manufacturing sector that has stagnated the economy. The other thing, of course, is maybe we've not addressed it well, is the issue of competition. Competition from abroad with more competitive. We have more competitive importers. So people would rather import rather than consume whatever we're producing locally. And this is brought about by our infancy. We have an infant industry that is still undergoing a process of growth. So, what are the immediate interventions that we can take? Number one, I think the truth is that if we want to grow the manufacturing sector, the government must create an environment that is conducive to boost financial direct investment and also motivate the current investors in Kenya. Otherwise, we are not going to do anything. So we must pull ourselves by the bootstrap and agree that as much as we have to, the government must raise revenue. It is almost impossible to do business in Kenya because of the approach that they've taken. So let us look at model countries like Singapore. Okay, let us look at how did they go about it. Vietnam, because one of the things that grows the manufacturing sector is a friendly and a tax haven given to investors so that we can grow the industry. Without also blaming the government so much, let us go to what we can do as other stakeholders. Number one, we must start echoing the issue of buy Kenya, build Kenya. the Made in Kenya initiative is very, very important. And it is all of us as stakeholders to start echoing and to start shouting, to start advocating for our goods. People will pay an incentive to wear a brand. We all know that. Okay? People will pay an incentive to wear a brand. And in the apparel industry that has been mentioned, we can see that also a hood that someone wears with an elephant and made in Kenya, people can sell for 2,000 shillings. And yet we have mitumba for 300, same thing. Why would people go for that? Let us build the brand, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. Let us make the Made in Kenya initiative something to be proud of. And lastly, I know we are stuck for time, is that I still insist on the regional approach. We are a market leader. How can we use policies, harmonize the policies within the East African community from that perspective, and how do we strategically place ourselves as manufacturing leaders? Because we are ahead of so many of our neighbors in terms of the resources, the intrinsic resources that give us a strategic advantage. Now, in the short run, of course, brothers fight. We will have some kind of internal competition and hurdles with Tanzania, and others. But in the long run, we are stronger together. It would be better for us to focus on by having a regional approach. We can be able to even go global and compete with other regions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Vimal, your parting shot, and maybe also you can just give us some ideas on how Kenyan manufacturers can take advantage actually of the regional and international markets. Of course, we're talking about AGOA, after etc.
Yeah, thank you. I think if you read what Kenya Association of Manufacturers stands for, driving global competitiveness. If we just get that act together, drive global competitiveness, make all our local manufacturing, local value addition globally competitive, we don't have to worry about tariffs, we don't have to worry about imports, we don't have to worry about taxes, because then we are globally competitive. What's stopping us from doing this? I think what I heard today morning was we probably have 2 or 3 governments in Kenya. One government says, we are all okay, everything is fine, we've done the infrastructure, everything is super. The other government says, no, this is a problem. And the third one is saying, I don't even know there's a problem. It's you guys, it's KM, you're the problem because you are not making enough. We've opened your market access to all the markets in the world and you are not producing. You get it? Yeah. And the third one was, I think, saying that we don't have enough corporates in Kenya. So even Kenya Invest itself is now attracting all the foreign investors by giving them tax incentives, duty-free, tax-free. For the guys who are already here, suffer. And I'm just saying openly that this hard talk needs to be happening to say, fine, let's decide once and for all, do we really want to be a supermarket? Which means we will just be consuming and we'll not stop consuming. Kenyans will consume. Or do we want to say consume and manufacture locally so that what you're saying, buy Kenyan, build Kenya, that's fine. But a consumer who says 300 bob and 2,000 bob, and you tell them he's got 10,000 shillings in the pocket, decide 300 or 2,000, oh, I'm a patriot, I'll pay 2,000. They will not. They will not. So we have to be competitive. There's no 2 ways about it. Globally competitive means everyone. You say, oh, it's made in Kenya, so Uganda, buy it, Tanzania, buy it. They won't. They love Kenyan products because esteem value for them is, oh, Kenyan products always a better quality. That's the esteem value there. But our costs are prohibitive. Number 2, I would even say that has EAC really helped us become big? Is it working today? I would say a flat no, because now there are so many stays of order in Arusha that everything is state, and really we're not able to export or not able to sell in the whole Eastern Africa market in a competitive way, because a lot of our products are being stopped. And I think this is high time now. We call it like Trump, right? Either we in or we out of EAC. and then declare and say, fine, now we will export. Because the whole ACFTA market, you talked about the TFTA market, which is COMESA, SADC, and ESC, and also AFCFTA, we will not be able to take advantage unless we are globally competitive. So we got to fix our home first and say, let's become competitive here. Another thing that KRA has nicely done, or government has done, is put in excise duties everywhere. These excise duties make our exports to East Africa far less competitive because you can't get them zero rated, you can't get a refund, you can't become competitive. You know that, right? So the IDF and the RDL, all that stuff makes us again non-competitive in the regional markets. So I'm just saying these are issues that we need to tackle. I can't spell all of them, but I think KM has everything. They've even got it in this whole agenda. If we go into it, find out these are the issues, we can tackle it. I think one more thing we have is amazing brains. We have amazing manpower. We have human capital, which is best. So there are good things about Kenya. There's no doubt about it. We can't say it's all lost, but we are losing it. If you actually take the 2024 figures now, and the 25 figures, your GDP contribution from manufacturing may even go down to 4%, 5%, right? And it's dropping as we speak. There are so many companies right now for sale. They're saying, not competitive, abandon. And there's regulation that's coming in like crazy. It's just not conducive. It's high time. We call a reset button and say press. In fact, have the customs guys, have the KRA guys, have the MPs in the room, have all the ministers in the room, and have State House, because that's another government. Bring them in the room and say, guys, let's decide and make this happen. Otherwise, we call it a day and say, fine, all of you guys get out of Kenya. But I think we have something amazing. We can fix it. We still have the will. We still have the wherewithal. We still have people who are here. Let's go fix it. Otherwise, after 1 year, 2 years, we'll say, hey, tumeshindwa.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, Morris, I'd just like to ask for your parting shots as well.
Thank you very much. There's one issue I need to mention.
Correct.
Yeah, a lot has been talked about taxes. But from a tax administrator point of view, taxes should not harm businesses. Because taxes rely on the success of businesses. So if there is a tax policy that you believe hamper businesses, then we need to have a discussion around it. I say this because, and I see a lot of mixed signals. Taxes are in two categories. There's indirect, that is VAT, excise, and then there's direct. Indirect taxes should not hamper businesses because they are taxes on consumers. I've had people, for example, complaining that they cannot get VAT refunds. I don't think it's that the policy of the tax administration or even the government as a whole is not to give VAT refunds. There could be other underlying reasons. When I talk about this, I talk about the issue of set-offs for imports. It is something that probably we are just not aligned, but I can assure you that VAT as a tax should not be a burden on business unless you are not registered for VAT. Because if you are not registered for VAT, then you are actually the final consumer. So it should affect you. The other thing I need to mention, and Dr. Bimal mentioned this, the issue of the states that create uncompetitiveness. One thing, and I believe Dr. Bimal will support this, all states that we have are from Kenya Association of Manufacturers. So then if there's a problem with the manufacturers on the issue of stays, then it means that probably there's something that is not well aligned. Actually, as administration, we have noted this, and early this year we communicated to the CS that we need to relook at the issue of stays. So as CAM submits the budget proposals, I think you need to align to this so that we review all those stays that are there at the moment and see whether they are working or we should actually remove most of them. because it's not a tax administration or tax policy development problem, it's a problem of the players. So let's work towards rationalizing those stays so that we only leave those ones which are going to help us. Otherwise, the key issue is that taxes should not be aimed at killing businesses, but we should find a way of using taxes to promote businesses. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Maurice. Dr. Vimal, does that surface? I had a feeling.
So can I just comment, because I think there's a misunderstanding. When I talked about stays of orders in Arusha, I talked about Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, everybody putting in stays so that the ESCC has very little meaning. That's what I meant. It's not only Kenya. And also I say one more thing. All stays in Kenya are not from KAM. I can categorically say that for my sector, because I think that's totally wrong. It was done by government just to hamper the industry.
Okay. Just hand over the microphone to Guraj. Give us your final sentiments. Of course, please, let's give Maurice a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so your final sentiments, and also what steps what steps is Can Invest taking when it comes to improving access to affordable financing for and incentives for manufacturers, especially the SMEs who are looking to scale up?
Thank you. I know the issue of financing, then the CS has talked about that. Government is really working on finally coming up with something which can, be, beneficial to the business community. But as Can Invest, in the last 2 months, we've been able to meet, stakeholders in the financing ecosystem, and we are trying to see how, within the business community will be able to get or access affordable financing. At SME level, government has created a KDC, which is there to de-risk investment, and they also lend long-term development financing. And so ours is to work with such stakeholders to ensure that then investors access the most needed capital for them to produce, and then it is this production which will create jobs, which is promised by the government. But finally, I think we have to now walk the talk. A number of issues have been talked about. The manufacturing sector is a really key sector within our Vision 2030. It's a key sector. Remember, previously, among the Big Four agenda of the previous administration, and in the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, it is also one key sector. I think it is time all the stakeholders now address issues which is now inhibiting progress within this sector. Thank you.
And thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. And lastly to you, Jane. As you give us your parting shots, maybe you can also tell us how can the county governments leverage on devolution to support the growth of competitiveness of the manufacturing sector?
Thank you very much. I think when it comes to the county governments, our request has always been they should not work in isolation, as if there's no national level guidance. So would like county governments to be cognizant of national level guidance, because sometimes we adhere to so many things at national level, but manufacturers are hosted by counties. There's no manufacturer who does not exist outside of a county. So as much as we are asking national government to create a conducive environment for businesses, I think they also have a double duty to create a conducive environment for businesses. We have talked about so many permits so many fees, so many charges that have to be paid at county level. Can we have a rationalization of all those levies, fees, and charges, so that as you are in that county, you don't feel even more constrained? You don't start thinking of going to another county which you have had has a better administration of revenue collection. If it is land zoning, if it is, just demarcating residential land, commercial land, industrial land, can it also be done so clearly that you don't have that conflict between residential places and commercial and industrial places? We're also saying, can they provide the necessary infrastructure? The roads that they're in charge of, and where they're not in charge of, can they speak to the national governments like Ministry of Roads to make sure they also lobby, because they would like manufacturers or businesses to actually thrive within their counties. So can they also do that lobbying on behalf of the manufacturers who are in those places? Can they provide solid waste management, so that being in the county does not mean you also take up some of the responsibilities that a county government should be taking up? I've talked about even isolating some places for dump fields, so that the counties are also as clean as the national cities are. All in all, would like also the county government to talk amongst themselves. I think we had the CS talking about how a product moves from county to county, from county to county, and with each cross to another county, you pay a new fee. You pay a new fee. We know they all want revenue, but can they talk amongst themselves to see how this can be streamlined, even if it means taking this debate to the Council of Governors level? So my parting shot is, business is always having an entrepreneurial mind. Can it be enabled to fully exercise that entrepreneurial mind to sell not only in the domestic market, not only in the regional market, not only in the African continent, but to compete with any similar product coming from anywhere in the world? And once we are at that level, I can assure you, even the stays of application that are always being put forward every year will minimize, because you'll say, let any product that wants to come to the market come, because I can compete effectively, because my cost of power is down, because the roads are good, access to raw materials is there. Let's compete globally.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you. A round of applause to each and every one of our panelists as they come down the steps. We'll start off with the one nearest to me. Jane Dunlop. Jane is the head of External Affairs, East Africa, MRM, and Safal Group. Tumpigie makofi one more time. We have Guraj Adni from Can Invest, Maurice Array, Deputy Commissioner, Policy and Tax Advisory, Dr. Vimal Shah, of course this is the BIDCO Africa Chair, and Dr. Steve Mokambi. Now, this may annoy you. Kindly come back, panelists, come back. We need to have a photo session, kindly. Please come back to the front. Jane? Please come back to the front. We need to have a photo session, and also just to tell you thank you, we appreciate you. Dr. Vimal, we need you back to the front, please. Okay. Tuwapigie makofi mara nyingine tu. Moja tu. Asanteni sana, thank you so much for panelists. I think the trick here, or rather what is tricky after having such a conversation, and I think Lawrence, when you come immediately after, is how exactly do you now ensure that the conversation does not stick here, or the conversation continues, or the solutions or the advices that have been made in this particular room are actually implemented? Kwa hivyo, hiyo ni ya Miriam. All right. Okay, so we've come to the end, ladies and gentlemen. I have been your host. My name is Nina Shaban once again. I work for the Nation Media Group. I am a business news reporter and anchor. Kwa hivyo, as much as I'm under KM right now, naomba tafadhali you watch NTV, okay? Business news. So I'm honored. Asanteni sana for accepting me and going through the whole morning with me. I'd like to now hand over to Mr. Lawrence Njenga from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. He is the head of corporate marketing and membership, and he's going to give us his vote, or rather their vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Let's appreciate her. She's been terrific, isn't it? All right. On behalf of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to all of you who've contributed to the success of this event today. To our chief guest who was with us this morning, we really do sincerely appreciate his invaluable insights into the manufacturing sector and his steadfast commitment to driving industrial growth in Kenya. And we note from his keynote address that he reinforced the importance of the collaboration between government and private sector in shaping a robust and globally competitive manufacturing sector. We also want to recognize and appreciate the invaluable contributions of our esteemed Principal Secretary, the CAM Board Chair, board members, our CEO, the CAM members present, and all industry leaders present. Your dedication to policy reforms indeed really works in creating an enabling business environment and instrumental for advancing our sector. To the panelists and participants, thank you for your active engagement and thought-provoking discussions. Your contributions indeed will play a critical role in shaping the successful implementation of the MPA 2025. And a heartfelt appreciation to the CAM team and the partners who've worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that this event had a resounding success. Indeed, your efforts will not go unnoticed. Finally, I think to our MC and moderator of the day, Nina Shebesh, thank you very much. You've been exceptional, and for the dynamic moderation in steering today's conversation with insight and with a lot of energy. And as we embark on the implementation of the manufacturing priority agenda for 2025, let us all remain steadfast in our commitment to advancing Kenya's industrialization and driving sustainable economic growth. Thank you, and let's continue working together to build a competitive, thriving manufacturing sector in Kenya. I thank you and wish you a good day ahead. Asante sana. Yeah. So I think this marks the end of our event today. Asanteni sana, really appreciate you.